Hello students, I'm Dr. Fulmore, and to know accounting, you must do accounting. And today we're diving deep into contribution margin analysis through 15 comprehensive problems with Oslo Company, a business that produces something every one of you desperately needs: premium portable phone chargers, those lifesavers that rescue you when your phone dies at 2% right before calling an Uber home at 2 a.m. You know exactly what I'm talking about. That panic when you're at 5% battery, still have 3 classes left, and need your phone for mobile tickets, payment apps, and navigating campus. Oslo Company specializes in high-capacity power banks that can charge your phone 4 times over, with fast charging capabilities and multiple ports, so you can be the hero who saves your friend's dead phone at a party. But here's why this matters beyond phone chargers. These exact calculations determine whether your favorite campus food truck survives next semester, why Netflix keeps raising prices, whether that startup idea you have is worth pursuing, and even whether you should take the job offer in San Francisco or Dallas after graduation. Let me tell you about a former student, Jennifer, who sat in this exact classroom 5 years ago. She used these contribution margin concepts to evaluate whether to open a custom sneaker design business. She calculated she needed to sell 45 pairs monthly to break even, realized her margin of safety would be too thin, and instead pivoted to a digital design service with better operating leverage. Today she runs a $2 million design agency because she understood these concepts. The framework we're learning today helped Andrew Carnegie become the richest man in America by understanding exactly how much each ton of steel contributed to his wealth. It's how Sarah Blakely turned $5,000 into $1 billion Spanx empire by knowing her contribution margins down to the penny. And it's the same math that determines whether DoorDash loses money on your $10 Chipotle order or makes a profit. By the end of these 15 problems, you'll understand why some businesses print money while others bleed cash. And more importantly, you'll be able to apply this to every financial decision in your life. Oslo Company, understanding our business model in detail. Before diving into calculations, let's thoroughly understand Oslo Company's business model, because context transforms abstract numbers into meaningful insights you'll remember during exams and use in real life. Oslo produces 1,000 power banks monthly, operating within a relevant range of 500 to 1,500 units. Think of this relevant range like your productive study hours, where you can effectively study between 2 to 6 hours daily, but below 2 hours you're just scrolling TikTok between highlights. And above 6 hours your brain turns to mush, and you're reading the same sentence 5 times without comprehension. Each power bank sells for $20, which is exactly what you'd spend on a Friday night, splitting an Uber XL with friends to downtown, 2 months of Spotify Premium, or that late night DoorDash order you immediately regret, generating total monthly revenue of $20,000. About what a part-time campus supervisor makes annually. Their $12,000 in variable expenses breaks down into fascinating components that change with each unit. Lithium battery cells at $6 per unit, the same technology in your laptop that degrades every time you leave it plugged in overnight. Circuit boards and USB ports at $3 per unit, why cheap chargers from gas stations fail after 2 weeks. Protective casing and packaging at $2 per unit, that satisfying unboxing experience, and direct shipping at $1 per unit. These costs scale directly with production, like how your weekend Uber costs depend entirely on how many parties you attend. The $6,000 in fixed expenses include $2,000 for workspace rent in that sketchy-looking industrial area where all the student startups cluster because it's cheap, $1,500 in equipment depreciation for testing devices and assembly tools that lose value whether used or not, like your car, $1,800 in base salaries for their small team who get paid, whether they make 500 or 1,500 units, and $700 in insurance and utilities that cost the same regardless of production, like your unlimited campus meal plan. This structure creates a net operating income of $2,000 monthly, which might not sound impressive until you realize that's $24,000 annually from a business that probably started in someone's dorm room, more than many students make in their first year after graduation. The foundation: why we use contribution format income statements. Let's examine Oslo's contribution format income statement that tells their complete financial story and understand why this format revolutionizes business decision-making compared to traditional accounting statements. Sales of $20,000 represent those 1,000 power banks flying off shelves to battery-anxious students who've learned the hard way that phone death means social death in college. Variable expenses of $12,000 capture all costs that fluctuate with production. Imagine if your laundry costs varied with how many outfits you wore, variable, rather than being $2.50 per load, regardless of how full the machine is, fixed. This distinction matters because it shows which costs you can control through volume decisions. The contribution margin of $8,000 represents what's left after covering variable costs, like what remains from your paycheck after buying gas to get to work. This is the money actually available to cover your fixed commitments and eventually create profit. Fixed expenses of $6,000 are Oslo's overhead that exists regardless of production volume, similar to how your Spotify, Netflix, gym membership, and rent cost the same whether you use them once or constantly. You're paying for availability, not usage. The resulting net operating income of $2,000 is pure profit, equivalent to what you might save monthly if you meal prepped instead of eating out, or what you'd earn from selling class notes to desperate classmates before finals. This format, revolutionary when introduced during the Great Depression to help businesses understand their survival point, differs from traditional income statements by grouping costs based on behavior rather than function. It's like organizing your expenses by costs that change with my choices versus costs I'm stuck with, rather than organizing by food or entertainment, providing clarity that saved countless businesses from bankruptcy, and will help you understand whether any business venture makes economic sense. Early in my career, I consulted for a manufacturing company that looked profitable on traditional statements, but was actually bleeding cash because their contribution margins were negative. They were literally losing money on every unit sold, but trying to make it up in volume, a recipe for bankruptcy that this format would have immediately revealed. Question 1. Contribution margin per unit. Question: what is the contribution margin per unit? Answer: $8 per unit. Step-by-step solution: total contribution margin equals $8,000. Total units sold equals 1,000 units. Contribution margin per unit equals $8,000, divided by 1,000 units equals $8 per unit. Alternative calculation method: selling price per unit equals $20,000, divided by 1,000 equals $20. Variable expense per unit equals $12,000, divided by 1,000 equals $12. Contribution margin per unit equals $20. $12 equals $8. Why this calculation matters? This $8 isn't just a number, it's the amount of actual cash each sale puts toward survival and success after covering the direct costs of that specific unit. Let me explain why this $8 contribution margin per power bank is Oslo's most critical metric, and why every successful business obsesses over this number. Think about it like this. When you work a shift at your campus job, your real hourly wage isn't the $15 they pay you. It's the $15 minus your $3 gas to get there, minus the $2 coffee you need to stay awake, minus the $1 parking fee. Your true contribution margin might only be $9 per hour, And that's what actually goes toward your rent and savings. For Oslo, this $8 means that selling power bank number 1001 puts exactly $8 additional in their pocket, not $20, because $12 goes straight to suppliers and shippers. This is why food delivery apps lose money on small orders. If DoorDash collects $3 in fees but pays the driver $5 plus credit card processing, their negative contribution margin means they lose more money with each delivery, hoping you'll eventually order enough to flip positive. I remember a student from 3 years ago, Marcus, who was reselling vintage clothing from thrift stores. He thought he was crushing it with $5,000 in monthly sales, until we calculated his contribution margin was only $2 per item after considering purchase costs, cleaning, photography time, and shipping. He realized he was basically working for less than minimum wage and pivoted to higher margin premium pieces. Henry Ford revolutionized manufacturing by obsessing over contribution margin per vehicle, discovering he could sell Model Ts for $290 less than competitors while maintaining profitability because his assembly line reduced variable costs so dramatically that his contribution margin was actually higher despite lower prices. For students running side hustles, this is everything. If you're reselling concert tickets, buying at $80 and selling at $100 gives you a $20 contribution margin. But after StubHub's 10% fee, PayPal's 3% cut, and your time value, your real contribution margin might only be $5. Suddenly that easy money doesn't look so easy. Modern companies live and die by this metric. Uber knows their contribution margin per ride down to the penny in each city, which explains why they surge price during rain, increasing contribution margin, and why they desperately push Uber One subscriptions, better contribution margins than individual rides. Question 2. Contribution margin ratio, the efficiency score that predicts success. Question. What is the contribution margin ratio? Answer, 40%. Step-by-step solution. Total contribution margin equals $8,000. Total sales equals $20,000. Contribution margin ratio equals $8,000 divided by $20,000 equals 0.40 or 0.440%. What this really means: for every dollar a customer pays, Oslo keeps 40 cents for fixed costs and profit. The other 60 cents immediately leaves for variable costs. This is their efficiency score. Higher is better. Why this ratio predicts business success or failure. Numbers tell a story, and Oslo's 40% contribution margin ratio reveals their business efficiency. It's like your GPA for business, where 40% is a solid B plus that gets you into grad school but isn't valedictorian material. Here's why this ratio matters more than total sales. A business with $1 million in sales and a 40% contribution margin ratio has $400,000 to cover fixed costs and create profit, while another business with $2 million in sales but only a 15% ratio has just $300,000 available. The smaller business is actually more profitable. This is exactly why your campus coffee shop, 60% contribution margin on fancy drinks, is more profitable than the convenience store next door, 20% margins on snacks and drinks, despite the store having way more customers. Think about different business models you interact with daily and their contribution margin ratios. Your university bookstore probably has 45% on textbooks, which explains those painful prices and why they can offer buybacks at 10% of purchase price. Chipotle operates around 35%, why they need volume and charge extra for guac. Dating apps like Tinder have 85% ratios, basically pure profit after minimal server costs, while DoorDash struggles at 15%, why they're still losing money despite billions in sales. During the Roaring '20s, companies with contribution margins above 35% survived the subsequent Great Depression, while those below 25% vanished. Coca-Cola's 42% ratio let them thrive while competitors disappeared, and they still maintain similar ratios today. For Oslo, this 40% ratio means they're in the sweet spot, better than retail, typically 25 to 35%, but not as good as software, 70 to 90%. Sustainable but with room for improvement through either raising prices, increasing the ratio, or negotiating better component costs, also increasing the ratio. This single ratio can predict whether a business will thrive or die, which is why venture capitalists obsess over it when evaluating startups. Question 3. Variable expense ratio, understanding where your money really goes. Question. What is the variable expense ratio? Answer. 60%. Step-by-step solution. Total variable expenses equals $12,000. Total sales equals $20,000. Variable expense ratio equals $12,000. Divided by $20,000 equals 0.60 or 0.660%. Quick check. These must equal 100%. Contribution margin ratio plus variable. Expense ratio equals 100%, 40%, plus 60% equals 100% checkmark. Why understanding? This ratio changes everything. This 60% variable expense ratio reveals the harsh truth. Oslo only truly owns 40 cents of each dollar they collect, while 60 cents immediately flows through to suppliers, shippers, and manufacturers. Let me explain why the variable expense ratio is like your personal spending tracker that reveals where money actually goes versus where you think it goes. Just like how you might think you're saving money by cooking at home until you calculate that your grocery trips for elaborate recipes cost more than meal prep services. Businesses often don't realize how much of their revenue immediately disappears to variable costs. Oslo's 60% ratio means that to put $1 in their pocket, they need to generate $2.50 in sales. $1 divided by 0.4 equals $2.50. $2.50. It's like needing to earn $25 per hour gross to take home $10 after taxes, commute costs, and work clothes. John D. Rockefeller built Standard Oil's monopoly by ruthlessly reducing his variable expense ratio from 75% to 30% through vertical integration. He bought oil fields to eliminate supplier markups, built his own barrels to avoid packaging costs, and owned railroad cars to control shipping, crushing competitors who couldn't match his efficiency. For students running businesses, this ratio determines your survival. If you're reselling sneakers with an 80% variable expense ratio, buying at $160 to sell at $200, you need massive volume to make meaningful money. But if you're tutoring with a 20% ratio, just transportation and materials, almost everything flows to profit. Think about why different businesses make different choices. McDonald's maintains a 65% variable expense ratio, but makes it up in volume. Luxury brands like Rolex keep it at 25% by charging massive markups, and your campus print shop probably runs at 40%, which is why they can offer student discounts and still profit. Oslo's 60% ratio is respectable for physical products, but explains why everyone wants to sell digital goods. Spotify's variable expense ratio on an additional premium subscriber is nearly 0% after content licensing minimums are met, pure profit flowing straight to the bottom line. Question 4. Single unit sales increase impact. Why every sale matters more than you think. Question. If sales increase to 1,001 units, what would be the increase in net operating income? Answer, $8. Step-by-step solution. Contribution margin per unit equals $8. Increase in units equals 1 unit. Increase in net operating income equals 1 unit times $8 equals $8. Why this works. The critical insight: fixed costs remain at $6,000. They don't care if you make 1,000 or 1,001 units. Variable costs only increase for that one additional unit. The entire $8 contribution margin flows straight to profit. Understanding why this creates wealth. This principle, that unit 1001 generates the same $8 contribution as unit 1, but all of it becomes profit, is how fortunes are built and why scale matters so much in business. Think about why this concept transforms businesses from struggling to successful. It's like when you've already paid for an unlimited monthly Metro card for $127. Every additional ride is essentially free, so taking the subway to one more job interview or social event costs you nothing extra. For Oslo, they've already paid their $6,000 in rent, salaries, and equipment, whether they sell 1,000 or 1,001 units. So that extra unit sold to a desperate student whose phone died during an Instagram story is almost pure profit. This is exactly why gyms oversell memberships knowing most people won't show up. Their fixed costs, rent, equipment, staff, remain constant whether 100 or 500 members come today, so each additional membership is nearly pure profit. Sam Walton built Walmart understanding this principle. After covering each store's fixed costs, every additional item sold was gravy, allowing him to accept tiny margins, knowing volume would create wealth. It's why they'll sell you a pack of gum for 3 cents profit, because that 3 cents is pure profit after fixed costs are covered. I had a student, Kevin, who ran a successful t-shirt printing business from his apartment. Once he covered his $500 monthly equipment lease and supplies, every additional shirt was almost pure profit, and he used this understanding to offer bulk discounts that still increased his total profits. For students, this explains why picking up an extra tutoring client is so valuable. Once you've already blocked out time and traveled to campus, the first client covers your fixed costs of time and transportation, but the second client in the same location is almost pure profit. Apple experiences this dramatically. After covering billions in R&D and marketing for the iPhone 15, each additional unit sold contributes roughly $450 directly to profit with no additional fixed costs, explaining why beating sales projections by even 1% sends their stock soaring, and why they'll spend millions on Super Bowl ads to drive incremental sales. This principle is why businesses fight so hard for market share. Those marginal customers beyond break-even are extraordinarily profitable. Question 5. Sales decline to 900 units impact. Why small drops cause big pain? Question. If sales decline to 900 units, what would be the net operating income? Answer: $1,200. Step-by-step solution. Sales, 900 units times $20, equals $18,000. Variable expenses, 900 units times $12 equals $10,800. Contribution margin equals $18,000 minus $10,800 equals $7,200. Fixed expenses, unchanged, equals $6,000. Net operating income equals $7,200 minus $6,000 equals $1,200. The shocking truth: sales declined by 10% from 1,000 to 900 units. But profit declined by 40%, from $2,000 to $1,200. This 4 times amplification is why businesses panic over small sales drops. Why small sales declines devastate profits. This disproportionate profit collapse from a modest sales decline explains why businesses obsess over customer retention, and why losing even a few customers triggers emergency meetings. Here's why that seemingly minor 100-unit decline obliterates 40% of Oslo's profit. Those fixed costs are like student loans. They don't care if you're employed. They want their money every month. When sales drop to 900 units, Oslo still owes the same $2,000 rent to their landlord, who doesn't care about their sales problems, the same $1,800 to employees who need to eat regardless of slow sales, and the same equipment payments whether machines run at 60% or 100% capacity. It's exactly like when you reduce your work hours from 25 to 22.5 per week, a 10% drop. But your profit, money left after fixed expenses, drops by 40% because rent, car insurance, and subscriptions didn't decrease at all. During the 2008 financial crisis, General Motors' high fixed costs meant a 15% sales decline eliminated all profitability. They went from billions in profit to billions in losses because those massive factories, pension obligations, and dealer networks demanded payment regardless of how many cars sold. For students, imagine you're selling meal prep to other students. If spring break reduces your customers from 50 to 45, your revenue drops 10%, but profit might drop 40% because you still pay the same commercial kitchen rental, insurance, and base supplies. This vulnerability explains why businesses do seemingly desperate things to maintain volume, why airlines overbook flights, better to pay one passenger to take a later flight than fly with empty seats, why movie theaters charge $15 for popcorn that costs 50 cents. They need contribution margin to cover massive fixed costs of the building and equipment, and why your favorite restaurant offers happy hour discounts. Better to sell at reduced contribution margins than have empty tables while still paying rent and staff. Oslo's situation shows why subscription models are so popular. Predictable revenue protects against these devastating volume drops. Question 6. Price increase with volume decrease trade-off. The premium strategy paradox. Question. If the selling price increases by $2 per unit and sales volume decreases by 100 units, what would be the net operating income? Answer, $3,000. Step-by-step solution. New selling price equals $20 plus $2 equals $22 per unit. New sales volume equals 1,000 minus 100 equals 900 units. 900 units. Sales revenue equals 900 units times $22 equals $19,800. Variable expenses equals 900 units times $12 equals $10,800. New contribution margin per unit equals $22 minus $12 equals $10. Total contribution margin equals 900 units times $10 equals $9,000. Fixed expenses, unchanged, equals $6,000. Net operating income equals $9,000 to $6,000 equals $3,000. The stunning result, lost 10% of customers, 100 units, but increased profit by 50% from $2,000 to $3,000. This is why premium brands often beat volume players, why losing customers can increase profits. This counterintuitive result, making 50% more money while serving 10% fewer customers, explains why Apple, Starbucks, and Lululemon dominate their industries despite having fewer customers than competitors. Let me explain why this pricing paradox works, and why it revolutionizes how you should think about business strategy. It's like choosing between being a tutor for 10 students at $20 per hour versus 7 students at $30 per hour. You work less, earn more, and have time for other opportunities. Oslo's scenario demonstrates that not all customers are equally valuable. Those willing to pay $22 for a premium power bank are actually worth more than the price-sensitive customers who left over a $2 increase. This is exactly how Howard Schultz transformed Starbucks from a commodity coffee seller to a premium third-place experience. He deliberately increased prices, knowing he'd lose customers who just wanted cheap caffeine, but the remaining customers who valued the experience, atmosphere, and status symbol generated far more profit. One of my brightest students, Rachel, applied this principle to her photography business. She doubled her prices, lost 40% of inquiries, but tripled her profit while working half the hours, allowing her to focus on school while building wealth. Think about real examples around you. That boutique fitness studio charges $35 per class, while the campus gym is $30 per month, yet the studio is more profitable because their contribution margin per customer is so much higher despite serving 90% fewer people. Apple masterfully executes this strategy. They have only 15% of global smartphone market share, but capture 85% of industry profits because their contribution margins are massive compared to Android phones selling at razor-thin margins. For students considering business models, this teaches a crucial lesson. Would you rather run a food truck serving 200 cheap meals daily at $2 profit each, $400, or a food truck serving 100 premium meals at $5 profit each, $500? The premium model means less work, less stress, higher quality, and more profit. Oslo's 50% profit increase from a 10% price increase, even with lost customers, shows why businesses often move upmarket during inflation rather than trying to maintain volume. It's mathematically superior if you can retain enough customers at the higher price point. Question 7. Multiple variable changes scenario when everything goes wrong at once. Question. If variable cost per unit increases by $1, spending on advertising increases by $1,500, and unit sales increase by 250 units, what would be the net operating income? Answer: $1,250. Step-by-step solution. New variable cost per unit equals $12 plus $1 equals $13. New sales volume equals 1,000 plus 250 equals 1,250 units. Sales revenue equals 1,250 times $20 equals $25,000. Variable expenses equals 1,250 times $13 equals $16,250. New contribution margin per unit equals $20. $13 equals $7. Total contribution margin equals $25,000. Minus $16,250 equals $8,750. New fixed expenses equals $6,000 plus $1,500 equals $7,500. Net operating income equals $8,750. $7,500 equals $1,250. The brutal reality: sales increased 25%, 250 more units. But profit decreased 37.5%, from $2,000 to $1,250. More work, more complexity, less profit, the growth trap. Why growth sometimes makes you poorer. This scenario, where Oslo works harder to earn less perfectly, illustrates the growth trap that kills many businesses, the false belief that more sales always equals more profit. Here's why this complex scenario produces such disappointing results, and why many rapidly growing companies actually go bankrupt. Imagine you're a successful tutor, charging $30 per hour with minimal costs, making good money. Then you decide to scale by hiring other tutors, renting a space, and advertising heavily. Suddenly you're managing 10 tutors, doing 250 hours weekly, massive growth. But after paying them, rent, and marketing, you're making less than when you tutored alone. This is exactly what happened to Oslo. That $1 increase in variable costs might be from battery suppliers raising prices due to lithium shortages, completely outside Oslo's control. The $1,500 advertising spend was supposed to drive growth, but only yielded 250 extra units. And now they're working 25% harder for 37.5% less profit. McDonald's faced this exact challenge in the early 2000s. When minimum wage increases, higher variable costs. combined with menu proliferation, complexity costs, and advertising wars, higher fixed costs, meant that despite serving more customers, franchisees were making less money. Think about WeWork's spectacular collapse. They grew revenue from $400 million to $2 billion in 3 years, but their contribution margins were negative on most locations, so growing actually accelerated their losses until they nearly went bankrupt. For students planning businesses, this teaches a critical lesson. Growth isn't always good. If you're selling custom merchandise and a bulk order forces you to hire help, increasing variable costs, and rent storage space, increasing fixed costs, you might make less profit on 1,000 units than you did on 500. The key insight is that Oslo should have either raised prices to maintain their $8 contribution margin despite higher costs, or rejected the growth opportunity entirely. Sometimes the best business decision is to stay small and profitable rather than grow into bankruptcy. This scenario explains why smart companies often deliberately limit growth, why exclusive brands maintain waiting lists instead of increasing production, and why your favorite small restaurant doesn't open a second location despite constant crowds. Question 8. Break-even point in units. Your business survival number. Question. What is the break-even point in unit sales? Answer. 750 units. Step-by-step solution. Break-even formula. Fixed expenses divided by contribution margin per unit. Break-even point equals $6,000 divided by $8 equals 750 units. Verification using the equation method. Profit equals unit CM times Q minus fixed expenses. At break-even, profit equals $0. $0 equals $8 times Q minus $6,000. 8Q equals 6,000 Q equals 750 units. Proof that we're right. Revenue, 750 times $20 equals $15,000. Variable expenses, 750 times $12 equals $9,000. Contribution margin equals $6,000. Fixed expenses equals $6,000. Net operating income equals 0 checkmark. Why break-even analysis determines life or death. To know accounting, you must do accounting. And this break-even point of 750 power banks isn't just a number. It's Oslo's survival threshold, the business equivalent of your minimum GPA to keep scholarships. Understanding why 750 units represents life or death for Oslo will change how you evaluate every business opportunity. Think about break-even like this. If your monthly expenses are $1,500, rent, food, car, insurance, and you earn $20 per hour after taxes, you need exactly 75 hours of work just to survive. Not save, not have fun, just exist. Every hour below 75 means going into debt. Every hour above starts building your future. For Oslo, selling 749 power banks means they're slowly bleeding money and will eventually close, while Unit 751 starts the path to profitability. It's binary, like passing or failing a class where 69.9% is failure, but 70% is passing. During World War II, manufacturers used break-even analysis to determine minimum production runs for military contracts, ensuring they wouldn't lose money if orders were canceled mid-production. If they needed 10,000 units to break even and the government only guaranteed 8,000, they wouldn't take the contract. I remember a student who wanted to start a smoothie bar near campus. When we calculated they needed 300 smoothies daily to break, even given the high rent location they wanted, they realized it was impossible and found a cheaper spot where 150 daily would work, which saved their business before it even started. Modern examples surround you. That new boba tea shop needs maybe 200 customers daily to break even, which is why they desperately promote grand opening specials. Your campus food truck needs about 150 meals daily. why they park in high traffic areas even if they have to pay premium spot fees, and that escape room business needs about 40 groups monthly, why they offer student discounts to fill slow weekday slots. For students considering starting businesses, this calculation is everything. If you want to start a car detailing service and your fixed costs, equipment, insurance, supplies, are $1,000 monthly with a $20 contribution margin per car, you need 50 cars monthly just to break even. Is that realistic in a college town? Oslo's 750 unit break even means they need to sell 25 power banks daily, assuming they work every day. Totally achievable on a college campus where phone death is social death, but it also means just 3 slow days could push them into lost territory for the month. Question 9. Break-even point in dollar sales. The revenue reality check. Question. What is the break-even point in dollar sales? Answer. $15,000. Step-by-step solution using CM ratio. Break-even in dollars equals fixed expenses divided by CM ratio. Break-even equals $6,000 divided by 0.4 equals $15,000. Alternative calculation, break-even units, X, selling price equals 750 times $20 equals $15,000. Using the equation method, profit equals open parenthesis, CM ratio times sales, close parenthesis, minus fixed expenses, 0 equals open parenthesis, 0.40 times sales, close parenthesis, minus 6,000, 0.40 times sales equals $6,000, sales equals $15,000. Why dollar break-even matters more than units. This $15,000 monthly break-even reveals the cold hard cash Oslo needs to survive. It's not about units sold but dollars collected, because landlords don't accept power banks as rent payment. Let me explain why knowing your dollar break-even is often more useful than unit break-even, especially when you sell multiple products or services. It's like knowing you need $2,000 monthly to cover all expenses, rather than tracking that you need 25 hours at job A plus 15 hours at job B plus selling 10 items on Depop. The dollar amount is what actually matters for survival. Oslo's $15,000 break-even means they need to generate this exact revenue to avoid losses. Whether that's from selling 750 regular power banks at $20, or maybe 600 premium ones at $25, or a mix of both plus accessories. The dollars are what count. Reqs used dollar break-even analysis to determine minimum sales requirements for McDonald's franchises, discovering that a location needed $3,000 daily sales to survive, which is why McDonald's won't approve franchise locations in areas without sufficient traffic to hit this number. Think about different break-even points in businesses you know. That vintage clothing store near campus probably needs $1,500 daily sales. Why they also sell online. The tattoo parlor might only need $500 daily. High margins, but appointment-based. Campus convenience stores need maybe $3,000 daily. Low margins requiring high volume. And your favorite study cafe needs about $800 daily. Why they host events and sell merchandise to boost revenue. For students running businesses, dollar break-even is more flexible than unit break-even. If you need $1,000 monthly to break even on your custom jewelry business, you could sell 50 pieces at $20 profit each, or 20 pieces at $50 profit each, or any combination that reaches $1,000. This flexibility is crucial when market conditions change. Oslo's $15,000 represents 75% of their current $20,000 sales, giving them a $5,000 cushion. Decent but not comfortable, like having 3 weeks of expenses and savings when financial advisors recommend 3 months minimum. Question 10. Target profit analysis, planning for success, not just survival. Question. How many units must be sold to achieve a target profit of $5,000? Answer: 1,375 units. Step-by-step solution: required contribution margin, fixed expenses, plus target profit required CM. $6,000 plus $5,000 equals $11,000. Units needed equals required CM divided by CM per unit. Units equals $11,000 divided by $8 equals 1,375 units. Using the equation method, profit equals open parenthesis. Unit CM times Q close parenthesis minus fixed expenses. $5,000 equals open parenthesis 8 times. Q close parenthesis minus $6,000. 8Q equals 11,000. Q equals 1,375 units. Sales revenue required: 1,375 units times $20 equals $27,500. Why target profit analysis drives every business decision. This calculation showing Oslo needs 1,375 units for a $5,000 profit isn't just math. It's the difference between surviving and thriving, between paying bills and building wealth. Here's why target profit analysis transforms vague goals into actionable plans, and why every successful business uses it constantly. It's like the difference between saying, "I want to save money for spring break," versus calculating, "I need to save $2,000 by March," which means working 150 hours at $20 per hour after covering my $500 monthly expenses over the next 3 months. Oslo's jump from 1,000 current units to 1,375 for their $5,000 profit goal represents a 37.5% increase in sales. Ambitious but achievable, like going from a B+ to an A in a class. Walt Disney used this exact analysis when planning Disneyland, calculating he needed 5 million visitors annually at specific ticket prices to achieve the profits that would satisfy skeptical investors who thought an amusement park was insane. He hit 6.5 million in year 2. For students, this is everyday math. If you want to save $3,000 this summer for studying abroad and have $2,000 in living expenses, with a job that nets $15 per hour after taxes, you need to work 333 hours over 12 weeks, about 28 hours weekly, totally doable but requires commitment. The insight here is that Oslo's $5,000 profit target requires selling an extra 375 units beyond current levels. That might mean adding a university bookstore contract, launching online sales, or partnering with student organizations for bulk orders. Tesla uses this analysis for each new gigafactory, calculating exactly how many cars must be produced and sold to justify billion-dollar investments. If the numbers don't work, they don't build. This target profit analysis also reveals the power of contribution margin. If Oslo could increase their contribution margin from $8 to $10 through cost reduction or price increases, they'd only need 1,100 units for the same $5,000 profit. That's why businesses obsess over margin improvement rather than just volume growth. Question 11. Margin of safety analysis. Your business cushion against disaster. Question. What is the margin of safety in dollars? What is the margin of safety percentage? Answer: $5,000 and 25%. Step-by-step solution: current sales equals $20,000. Break-even sales equals $15,000. Margin of safety in dollars equals $20,000. Minus $15,000 equals $5,000. Margin of safety percentage equals $5,000. Divided by $20,000 equals 25%. In unit terms, current units equals 1,000. Break-even units equals 750. Margin of safety equals 250 units. 25% of current volume. What this really means: sales can drop 25% before Oslo starts losing money. They can lose 250 customers and still survive, barely. This is their cushion against disaster. Why? Margin of safety determines who survives economic storms. Numbers tell a story, and Oslo's 25% margin of safety tells us they can weather a moderate storm, but not a hurricane. It's like having a C+ in class where you're passing, but one bad test could fail you. Understanding why margin of safety matters will change how you evaluate risk in business and life. Think of it like your emergency fund. If you have $3,000 saved and spend $1,000 monthly, your 3-month margin of safety means you could lose your job and survive 3 months while job hunting, but Oslo's 25% margin is only a 1-month equivalent cushion. Companies that survived the Great Depression typically maintain margins of safety above 35%. When sales dropped 30% industry-wide, they remained profitable while competitors went bankrupt. Procter & Gamble's 40% margin let them actually acquire struggling competitors during the downturn, growing stronger while others died. For students, your margin of safety appears everywhere. If you need a 70% to pass a class and you're at 77%, your 10% margin of safety is dangerously thin. One bad assignment could fail you versus sitting at 85%, where you could bomb a quiz and still get a B. Think about different businesses' margins of safety. Luxury brands like Louis Vuitton operate with 60% margins. They could lose half their customers and survive. Southwest Airlines revolutionized aviation with 40% margins while competitors had 5%. Why Southwest survived 9/11 while others went bankrupt. Budget airlines today run at 5% margins. Why Spirit charges for everything including water. And your campus bookstore probably has 30%. Why they survive despite Amazon. Warren Buffett famously insists all Berkshire Hathaway companies maintain at least 30% margins of safety, calling it the 3 most important words in investing. It's why Berkshire weathers every recession while aggressive competitors collapse. Oslo's 25% margin is decent but not comfortable, like living paycheck to paycheck with just 1 month's expenses saved. They could survive a bad month, maybe spring break when campus empties, but not a bad semester, like COVID sending everyone home. Question 12. Degree of operating leverage, the profit amplifier. Question. What is the degree of operating leverage? Answer. 4.0. Step-by-step solution. Degree of operating leverage, contribution margin, net operating income D. OL. $8,000 divided by $2,000 equals 4.0. What this 4.0 really means, a 1% change in sales creates a 4% change in profit. A 10% sales increase would boost profit by 40%. A 10% sales decrease would slash profit by 40%. Oslo has 4 times amplification on both gains and losses. Why operating leverage creates millionaires and bankruptcies. This operating leverage of 4.0 means Oslo experiences quadruple amplification. It's like using 4 times leverage on Robinhood, where a 5% stock movement means a 20% gain or loss in your account. Let me explain why operating leverage is the most important concept most business students never truly understand, yet it determines whether businesses create vast wealth or spectacular failures. Think of operating leverage like this. If you rent a $2,000 per month apartment alone, high fixed costs, your leverage is high. Getting a roommate cuts your cost by 50%, but losing your job means you still owe the full $2,000. Alternatively, if you live in a dorm paying daily rates, variable costs, you have low leverage, less upside potential, but also less downside risk. Oslo's 4.0 leverage means they're moderately leveraged, like a student with some student loans, fixed, but also working part-time, variable income, manageable risk with meaningful upside. Andrew Carnegie's steel mills operated with leverage exceeding 6.0, which made him the richest man in America during boom times, but required nerves of steel during downturns when profits evaporated faster than snow in July. For students running businesses, high operating leverage happens when you have high fixed costs relative to variable costs. Imagine buying a $3,000 embroidery machine for custom apparel. Your variable cost per shirt is just $5, creating huge leverage where busy months generate massive profits. But slow months are painful because that machine payment is due regardless. Modern examples demonstrate extreme leverage. Microsoft's Windows division has leverage approaching 10.0 because once Windows is developed, massive fixed cost. Each additional license costs virtually nothing, near zero variable cost, explaining their 40% profit margins. Movie theaters have leverage around 5.0, huge fixed costs for buildings and equipment, low variable costs per viewer, explaining why they charge $15 for popcorn that costs 50 cents. They need contribution margin desperately. Oslo's 4.0 leverage is the sweet spot, higher than restaurants, typically 2.0, mostly variable food and labor costs, but lower than software companies, often 8.0 plus, mostly fixed development costs, providing meaningful upside without catastrophic downside risk. Question 13. Operating leverage impact calculation, small changes, big results. Question. Using the degree of operating leverage, what is the estimated percent increase in net operating income from a 5% increase in unit sales? Answer. 20% increase. Step-by-step solution. Degree of operating leverage equals 4.0 sales. Increase equals 5%. Profit increase equals DOL. Times sales increase equals 4.0. Times 5% equals 20%. Verification with real numbers. New sales equals 1,050 units, 5% increase. New contribution margin equals 1,050 times $8 equals $8,400. Less fixed expenses equals $6,000. New net operating income equals $2,400. Percentage increase equals $2,400. Minus $2,000 divided by $2,000 equals 20% check mark. The power of small improvements. 50 extra power banks, just 2 per day, equals $400 extra profit, 20% increase. This is why businesses obsess over tiny market share gains, why small changes create massive wealth. Through leverage, this 20% profit surge from just 5% more sales explains why businesses will do almost anything for small sales increases. It's like how a small GPA improvement can dramatically change your class rank and job prospects. Here's why this 4x amplification transforms how businesses think about growth and why they'll spend millions for tiny market share gains. Imagine you're ranked 50th in your class. Improving your GPA by just 5% might jump you to 30th because of how clustered grades are, dramatically improving graduate school and job prospects. That's operating leverage in academics. For Oslo, selling just 50 more units monthly, less than 2 per day, generates $400 additional profit, a 20% increase. This is why businesses offer student discounts, partner with organizations, and run social media campaigns for seemingly small sales bumps. During the 1990s tech boom, companies with high operating leverage saw profits explode. Amazon's early leverage meant that growing from 1 million to 1.1 million customers, 10% growth, increased profits by 60%, creating the cash flow that funded their expansion into everything from cloud computing to groceries. Think about everyday leverage examples. A coffee shop during finals week might see 5% more customers but 20% more profit because the baristas and equipment are already there, fixed costs covered, just working slightly harder. An Uber driver experiences this during surge pricing. 5% more rides at 2 times prices might mean 40% more profit after covering fixed car costs. Netflix demonstrates this perfectly with their 6.0 operating leverage. Adding 5% more subscribers cost them virtually nothing in variable costs. Same content library, same servers, so that growth translates to 30% profit increase, explaining why missing subscriber targets by even 1% crushes their stock price. For Oslo, this means that winning one university contract for 50 units monthly would boost profits by 20%, making seemingly small opportunities incredibly valuable. This is why businesses fight viciously over small market share points. That 1% market share gain might mean 5% sales growth and 20% profit growth through operating leverage. Question 14. Reversed cost structure analysis from stable to volatile. Question. If variable expenses were $6,000 and fixed expenses were $12,000, reversed from original, what is the degree of operating leverage? Answer: 7.0. Step-by-step solution. New contribution margin equals sales minus variable expenses. New CM equals $20,000 minus $6,000 equals $14,000. Net operating income equals CM minus fixed expenses. NOI equals $14,000 minus $12,000 equals $2,000. Profit unchanged. Degree of operating leverage equals $14,000 divided by $2,000 equals 7.0. Comparing the two structures, original, DOL equals 4.0, moderate leverage, moderate risk. Reversed, DOL equals 7.0, high leverage, high risk. This is a 75% increase in both risk and reward potential. Why cost structure determines business destiny. This shift to 7.0 operating leverage transforms Oslo from a steady business to a high-stakes gamble, like switching from a salary job to pure commission where you could make millions or nothing. Understanding why this cost structure reversal changes everything will help you evaluate career choices and business models. It's like choosing between two job offers, one with a $50,000 base salary plus small bonuses, low leverage, stable, versus pure commission that could pay $20,000 or $200,000 depending on performance, high leverage, volatile. With the reverse structure, Oslo becomes more like a software company. Imagine they developed an app instead of selling physical chargers. Their fixed costs would be high, developers, servers, marketing, but variable costs near zero. Each download costs nothing, creating extreme leverage. The newspaper industry experienced this exact transformation when shifting from physical printing, high variable costs for paper, ink, delivery, to digital publishing, high fixed costs for technology, low variable cost per reader, which is why newspapers now either make massive profits or go bankrupt with little middle ground. Think about different leverage levels in careers. Investment banking has extreme leverage, huge fixed salaries and office costs, but each deal generates massive fees. Teaching has low leverage, salary is mostly fixed regardless of class size, and real estate agents have high leverage, no base pay but huge commissions on sales. For students, this is like choosing between paying $1,200 per month for a solo apartment, high fixed cost, high leverage, versus $400 per month in a quad, lower fixed cost, lower leverage. The solo apartment means any income loss is catastrophic, but if you can afford it, you get all the benefits. Airlines epitomize this high leverage model with massive fixed costs for planes and gates. Adding one passenger to a flight costs almost nothing, peanuts and drinks, so that last-minute business traveler paying $2,000 is almost pure profit, but an empty seat is pure loss. Under this reversed structure, Oslo would be betting everything on volume. Amazing if they're right about demand, catastrophic if they're wrong. Question 15. High operating leverage impact, living on the edge. Question. Using the 7.0 degree of operating leverage from question 14, what is the estimated percent increase in net operating income from a 5% increase in unit sales? Answer, 35% increase. Step-by-step solution. Degree of operating leverage equals 7.0. Sales increase equals 5%. Profit increase equals DOL times. Sales increase equals 7.0 times 5% equals 35%. Comparing impact of 5%. Sales increase, original structure, DOL 4.0. 20% profit increase, reverse structure, DOL 7.0. 35% profit increase. The high fixed cost structure amplifies results by 75% more. Why high leverage creates extreme outcomes? This 35% profit explosion from just 5% more sales explains both spectacular business successes and failures. It's financial rocket fuel that can launch you to the moon or blow up on the launch pad. Here's why high operating leverage creates billionaires and bankruptcies, often in the same industry at the same time. It's like crypto trading with leverage. A 5% Bitcoin price increase might mean a 35% gain in your leverage position, but a 5% decrease means a 35% loss. You're amplifying everything. For Oslo, under this structure, those same 50 extra units now generate 700 additional profit instead of 400, nearly double the impact. During economic booms, high leverage businesses print money. Commercial real estate companies might see 20% revenue growth translate to 200% profit growth as their fixed property costs remain constant, while rents soar. But the 2008 crisis showed the flip side. Those same companies saw 20% revenue declines, completely eliminate profits, and push them into bankruptcy. Think about how this applies to your life choices. Taking on high student loans for medical school is high leverage. Massive fixed costs, loan payments, but potentially massive returns, doctor salary, versus learning a trade with minimal debt, low leverage, but also lower ceiling. WeWork exemplified extreme leverage gone wrong. They signed long-term fixed leases, massive fixed costs, while offering short-term flexible rentals, variable revenue. So when occupancy dropped even slightly, they hemorrhaged billions. Amazon Web Services demonstrate successful high leverage. Their massive fixed infrastructure investment means each additional customer is nearly pure profit, generating the cash that funds Amazon's entire empire. For students considering business models, high leverage means higher stakes. A tutoring center with a fixed location and staff high leverage could make far more than individual tutoring, low leverage, but one bad month could bankrupt you versus just earning less as an individual tutor. Oslo's 7.0 leverage would mean every decision becomes critical. One good marketing campaign could double profits, but one quality problem could destroy the company. Comprehensive integration, the complete picture that changes everything. Let's synthesize all 15 questions into a unified understanding that transforms how you'll see every business for the rest of your life. Oslo Company's story reveals universal truths. Their $8 contribution margin per unit drives everything from break-even at 750 units to needing 1,375 units for meaningful profit. Their 25% margin of safety provides breathing room but not comfort, and their 4.0 operating leverage amplifies both opportunities and threats. These aren't just numbers, they're the DNA of business success or failure. Think about how these concepts explain everything around you. Why your favorite small restaurant closed, insufficient margin of safety. Why tech companies have astronomical valuations despite losing money. Massive operating leverage potential once profitable. Why luxury brands limit production, protecting contribution margins over volume. And why some students graduate with six-figure job offers while others struggle. They understood leverage in choosing majors and schools. The framework we've mastered today is identical, whether you're analyzing a lemonade stand or Apple Incorporated. Contribution margin determines unit economics. Break-even points determine survival requirements. Margin of safety determines resilience. And operating leverage determines wealth creation potential. Every entrepreneur from your roommate selling custom merchandise to Elon Musk, betting on Tesla, uses these exact calculations daily. Jeff Bezos built Amazon, understanding that accepting losses while building scale would eventually tip the contribution margin math to create unprecedented wealth. He saw the leverage endpoint, while others saw only current losses. You now possess the same analytical tools that private equity firms use to identify acquisition targets, that venture capitalists use to evaluate startups, and that CEOs use to make strategic decisions. The beauty lies in the simplicity. Just 4 key concepts that explain infinite business complexity. Your action plan: transform knowledge into your future success. To know accounting, you must do accounting, and now it's time to apply these tools to transform your own life and career prospects. First, conduct 3 real-world analyses this week. Calculate the contribution margin at your workplace by observing variable versus fixed costs. Estimate your favorite business's break-even point by counting customers and estimating average purchase. And figure out operating leverage by noting how profits seem to change with busy versus slow periods. Second, apply this framework to your personal finances. Calculate your monthly break-even point essential expenses, determine your margin of safety, emergency fund divided by monthly expenses. Assess your operating leverage, fixed commitments versus variable spending, and model how different career paths change these metrics. Third, use these tools for immediate decisions. Should you take the unpaid internship that builds skills, investing in future contribution margin, or the paid job with no growth, current cash but no leverage? Should you buy that expensive equipment for your side business, increasing fixed costs and leverage, or continue renting, keeping costs variable? Should you lock in a yearly gym membership for savings, fixed cost, or pay monthly for flexibility, variable cost? Remember, numbers tell a story. You now read that story fluently. The difference between students who struggle financially after graduation and those who thrive isn't luck. It's understanding these principles. When you evaluate job offers, don't just compare salaries, compare contribution margins after considering commute costs, wardrobe requirements, and city living expenses. When you consider starting a business, don't just dream about revenue. Calculate break-even points and margin of safety requirements. When you make major purchases, understand how they change your operating leverage. The students who internalize these concepts don't just pass accounting. They build wealth, create successful businesses, and make informed decisions that compound into extraordinary lives. You now have the tools. The only question is, will you use them?